I'm Scott Usher. I'm the creative director at Haven Light, and this is Haven Light Artist Spotlight, and we are here in the studio today with Justin and Anna Culebro. Thank you for coming in, guys.
Thank you so much for having us.
Glad to be here. Thank you.
Excellent. One of the great things about being an elder statesman like I am is because you've been around for a while, you have the opportunity to see new things happen a couple of times. And I've been lucky enough in my career to see new art forms, new tools for creating art come along. And we met you guys because you were really at the forefront of what I think is the whole AI revolution with Messiah AI. And you guys started Messiah AI when you were like 6 or something ridiculously young like that.
Cool.
Tell me a little bit about, where the idea for Messiah AI came from. I really want to get across the fact that, you guys were like still super teenagers when you really did it, but early adopters. Tell me a little bit about coming into Messiah AI.
Yeah, we've been at it for a while, and we've really developed and improved our skills and the paintings and the images over time.
Yep.
But way back when, years back, when DALL-E 2 first came out, that was the first tool I ever worked with. And, I've always loved Jesus Christ art. I've always loved technology. Mm-hmm. And when DALL-E 2 came out, I was just wide-eyed. I was like, this is amazing what some of this stuff can do. And it was very primitive back then, and I will tell you, some of the very first images I made were a little frightening.
Yeah, I called him out. I was honest. I was like, what is this? What are we
Well,
trying
you're
to
a
do
painter,
here?
Anna.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, I have background knowledge, at least, I'm not professional, but I know what I'm doing. And so when he showed me some of his first pieces, I was like, the idea is there, but it doesn't look great kind of thing.
Yeah. And it first came from like a religion project. I was trying to incorporate a concept of Jesus Christ for this part of the project. And it looked really rough, but it was like encouraging to me. So after that, I decided to just experiment with Jesus Christ in different settings. And it was very colorful. It was very abstract in the beginning. But I kept at it. I kept showing Anna, who gave me some feedback. And we started making some pieces, and it kind of got on a roll from there.
Okay, so like I say, first you're fooling around with DALL-E.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And, but you're doing enough of this. And like I say, Messiah AI to me is an idea that was entirely before its time. And I keep telling you guys all along, this is going to come back again because it's the right idea. What was the idea of Messiah AI? Because initially you were trying to get universities and like people around the country involved in what you were doing.
Yeah, so the idea is, with technology, we can now depict Jesus Christ in many different forms, things that people have never seen before, in a way that's very imaginative and also relatable to all kinds of people. And we have the tools to now take the imagination and apply it with technology to Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
Yeah, and at one point we did talk about, wanting to create a space where other artists who are using AI and other digital formats could come and share their art as well. And so that was kind of the initial idea with Messiah AI and what we were doing. Yeah,
I know it evolved to a different point, but I remember the first time you guys were telling me, I'm like, oh, that's like the Facebook, back when they came up with that, radical idea. But I'll just say, it was like, again, I love the idea of like, okay, let's spread the word of Christ. Let's have a platform that everyone can use this funky tool that's out there and have a place that they can post and show what they're doing. And so, like I say, man, you guys were just so far ahead of the curve at the point in time. And I can say, some of the stuff that's in there was kind of crude, but at the same time, it was kind of fun.
Yeah.
What's the character from Star Wars that, not the Ewoks,
Ooh, there's so many.
Blank.
Obi-Wan Kenobi Jedi's, Imperial Walkers.
Opening scenes, they're the things that capture R2-D2 the first time.
Oh, Jawas.
Jawas, yes. Jawa Jesus.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
That was one of my favorite early pieces because it's just like, the robe and everything like that. But to me, that also kind of established what you guys were doing for me because there's a bunch of people that were out there saying, make me a picture of Jesus. And right away, when you guys were building things, you were trying to create scenes. You were trying to create things in a way that I didn't see other people doing. Whether or not the technology could keep up with what you were trying to do. But I'll just sit there and say, from the beginning, the neatest thing that I've been seeing what you're doing is you were a step out and trying to create a presentation, a scene. I keep on coming to this idea of intent. I have the intent of creating an environment that's going to happen in this picture that is not just me putting in a couple of prompts saying, hopefully I get a good picture of Christ.
Today's episode is brought to you by Haven Light, the premier religious art dealer with curated collections to help you find your Jesus and invite more light into your home. If you've been looking for a piece of religious art, shop our curated collections at the link in the description below and use code PODCAST20 for 20% off of your order. Let's get back to today's episode.
Yeah, there are plenty of people that do that kind of do a bunch of prompts trying to come up with things, and those are all very similar and alike. You can kind of tell when there's a pattern going on there. We are very intentional. We put a lot of thought and effort into ours, and we think they turn out different and are inspiring. We hope so anyway.
Yeah, like you said, it's not just like make a picture of Jesus and then we just pump out whatever comes up.
If I do 250 of them, chances
Right.
are I might get something that's semi-decent.
Right.
You know?
No, it's usually like, I want these colors, I want these textures, I want Jesus doing this with these people. It's very intentional. We have an idea in mind before we go and make a piece.
And plenty of edits afterward
Yeah.
too, to fine tune, to tweak.
I think it's another thing that, like say, they used to have this thing in the art business that's around, put a monkey in a room for infinity with an easel and some paints and you'll get a Picasso out of it. And certainly there is this thing of being able to put prompts in where you can get lucky.
Right.
Right.
One every 250,000 images, everything's just going to come together. And just might come together well. But the other side of the whole thing is I am creating it with intent. And there's a bunch of painters that might sit out there and say, oh, not with the level of intent that I am. I'm going to turn around and say, you're creating with intent. You're guiding what is going to come out of there. And that is the creation of artwork. It's what we do in this space. We talk about creation. We talk about creating. And, you are guiding the creation of something with intent. And that's the difference to me about getting lucky with prompts and trying to make something that delivers a succinct message and feeling.
Of course. Yeah, we're very proud of the effort and the time that we put into each of our pieces.
For sure.
Yep. So one of the first pieces that kind of passed Jawa Jesus, that I'll just say, wow, just really showed where you guys are coming from and where you're going is a piece called Trust in Him, which has a lot of reasons to me why it's working. Where does that come from?
I think with all of our art, we try to depict Jesus in a way that can be relatable to other people. So Justin was actually the one that initially started creating this piece and this idea. And we've seen a lot of images of Christ walking on water or Christ calming the seas. But with this one, we were like, what if a woman is with him, a modern woman, someone that we can all feel like we relate to, and she's walking with him through the water. And so I think that really captures the essence of what we try to do with all of our art. We try to create Jesus in modern scenarios, in scenarios that people can relate to. And I think that's why it's done so well, why people have picked up on it, because everybody feels like that at some point in their life.
Right, and it's so rich with symbolism. That's another thing that we try to tie into our pieces. And like Anna was saying, the fact that Jesus Christ is with you through your trials. Sometimes maybe you can walk on water with him. Sometimes he'll walk through water with you. It's just a really neat concept that I think people are gravitating towards.
Well, never underestimate the power of the hoodie.
Of course.
Because,
So true.
I kid around, but I'll just sit there and say, I think that is so much why this piece is working so well, because it really says this is today now. It's not like, maybe it's this time period or something like that. And the other thing that I'm really noticing, because I can see a lot of what people are buying and kind of the price points they're buying at, and I'm noticing that a ton of these pieces are going out as unframed 8x10s and 11/14s.
Right.
And when I see that, I'm like, somebody's given this as a gift. You need this.
Yes.
I want to give this to you because I think this will help you out with where you are.
Yeah, we love that. That's true impact right there, is people, feeling the emotion, feeling Christ beside them, and receiving this.
Yeah,
Yep.
it means the message is there. It's getting across.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like I say, you started out, said, I want to make something happen.
Yeah.
It's happening. And then, let's say, I can see the pattern. and how it's going out into the world. So I say,
Right.
yeah, 100%. So you have something like that. Then there's a piece called worship, where you've actually taken Christ and you've put him inside of a church, nondescript, but definitely
Right.
he's coming down the center aisle in a church. What's the idea behind that one?
Yeah, well, the whole purpose of church in general is to, focus our minds, our hearts on Jesus Christ. And you don't really see a lot of these depictions of Jesus Christ actually in a church, which is interesting because we worship Christ, well, in our homes, of course, but also we gather together in a church to worship him, and he's the focal point.
Yeah, to feel his presence. It is symbolic of his presence being there in the church as you're worshiping him. And again, like we didn't really see depictions of that before this, and so we really wanted to capture that feeling. And it's a modern space that people are like, oh, I go to church. My church looks like that, yeah.
As someone who attends church regularly, like that's the goal. I want to feel Jesus Christ there.
And you're really working towards a style. Like if that
Yes.
picture, if that was your prompt, couple of prompts, picture of Jesus walking down the center aisle of a church, and it came out one of these photoreal things, it just wouldn't work.
Right.
You know, you're like, that's too real. It's not working. But having put together the kind of misty, impressionistic piece that you ended up have
Yes.
coming out of that, to me, is really key in how that comes together.
Totally agree.
Yeah, I feel like Impressionism has been one of my biggest influences when I paint. And
Yeah.
so a lot of that is reflected in a lot of our pieces. The
Yeah.
textures, the subtle colors coming together. I think we really try to emulate that in whatever way we can.
Yep. No, like I say, that's, again, the fun thing about going back to the idea of it's a tool that you are driving.
Right.
And that's the difference between, someone told me the term prompt engineer. And I think it's a little derogatory. I don't know if somebody put it together saying, oh, it's,
Yeah.
it's a good thing. Prompt engineer to me is kind of the monkey in the room.
Right.
And I know that it says they're an engineer, so there's a lot more intention, but it's more like, hey, you're not a prompt engineer. You're a creative who's using this tool, or
Right.
a pair of creatives that are using this tool,
yes.
to be more accurate, and having the outcome that you're getting. So again, we're in this impressionistic space. Another one that's kind of a neat, ghostly, impressionistic feeling of Christ is Only Begotten.
Yes.
He's there, he's not there. What's the ultimate message of what that piece is?
For me, it's like his power and majesty. It's like soft and subtle, yet like bold.
Yeah.
You see Jesus, you see those colors, even though it all blends together. Jesus to me is the most magnificent, majestic being that has ever lived on this earth.
Yeah, he has presence in that piece.
Right.
Oh,
you know,
100%.
His shoulders.
Yes, exactly. And that's what we were going for with that one, for sure.
Really embodies his sacredness as well.
Yes.
So again, you kind of have this style that you're floating around in. Now you're taking something where you're putting Christ in an environment with a bunch of kids. Become like little children.
Yes.
One of the toughest things is to get a piece to come out where everybody's got all their limbs, where everybody's got all their parts, and truly you don't see a lot of groups of people because it's really hard to control in that space.
Right.
And more with you guys, there's a number of pieces where you have groups of people together. And this is one where like all the kids are there, all the figures are right. Is there, without giving away a trick of the trade, how are you getting that to happen that way? Because it's not that common.
Right. Well, it's not putting out 250,000.
Yeah.
It's a lot of intention into
Yeah.
a piece. It's a lot of effort and time spent with the piece before and after.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it kind of shows our post-production skills as well.
Yeah.
Like, we don't just put in a prompt, get an image, and then hand it off and
Yeah.
say, this is our piece. We put time and effort after as well to get, obviously, if there are limbs missing, get that right. Or any of the colors or textures that may be off, we also do a lot of editing in that sense.
Yeah. Are you ever like kind of really moving entire figures? Can you get to the point that you're kind of, oh, I don't like them here, I'm going to put them over here? Are you doing that type of work as well? Because I just found out within the past couple of weeks that there has been a change at the copyright office for copyrighting a work in the space, which is if you can show a material perceivable difference between whatever the object was that was downloaded with the final object that you've used all the other things, Procreate, Photoshop, Lightbox, whatever it is that you're going to be using in that space to really digitally augment, change, and further the work, that they are now beginning to assign copyright to stuff coming out of there.
Yeah, that's way cool to hear.
Yeah.
I would say absolutely you can tell the difference if you put the two images side by side before and after. It's often many edits that are small, and then we're also able to move large sections or change large sections as well.
Yeah.
And that's come with time and experience, but we feel that absolutely there's
100%.
discernible differences.
Because sometimes, like, we get a piece where I'm like, okay, I like how Jesus looks, I like the colors, the texture, but, like, the composition is just off.
Yeah.
And so we're able to edit and go in and, like, either add to the piece or add figures, whatever it may be, so that we can completely change the piece into what we were looking for exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, like I say, it's a tool.
Yeah.
It's becoming more apparent that it's just one of a series of things in the kit bag of tools.
Right.
You know, but, you know, I can remember when Photoshop came out. You know, wasn't around when photography first happened, but I know photography was heresy. You know, and there's a quote I love from the 1840s where, you know, painting is dead. You know, you know, no painting will just go away now that you have photography. And then, you know, I knew guys that were, I can't believe it's coming up on 100 years, but I knew guys that were painting when I first started my career that were painting pulp magazines in the 30s. Wow. And they would sit there with the most traditional, this guy by the name of Tom Lovell, and the most traditional, okay, you do your pencil sketch, and you do your value sketch, then you do, here is the process. And from the 30s through the 90s, that's how this guy painted, you know, every single thing. And then, like, Photoshop came along, and some of the other digital tools that were pre-Photoshop. I can't remember half the names of the stuff, but there was some, you know, there was a lot of things that were out there. Nobody remembers them anymore. And I was like, oh, Tom, these are amazing tools. He's like, yeah, I'm just too old to learn what they are. I don't have a beef with the tool. You know, if I was younger and I could get into it and I could figure out how to do these things, but this is just how I do it. This is my system. I'm going to go this way. But like I say, you know, you get this. So again, then that was cheating. That was all the things that were wrong. And now it's abjectly commonplace. Right. And you'll definitely get to the point where this tool, which is just, again, something that's in the toolbox, is going to have that type of, you know, people are like, oh, yeah, okay, just one of the tools that's helped me get to where I get. Doesn't take away from the painter.
Right.
You know?
Right.
Oh, yeah.
If anything, the painter wins. You know,
so true.
You know, in the long run, you're going to have original artwork's going to have, if anything, even more value to it. You know, because this is made by humans.
Oh yeah.
Right.
You know, but it doesn't take away from the end product and the relationship that you can have with the tool, that something that you're just making entirely digitally. You just happen to be driving it digitally in a different way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's the interesting thing about art, is that it's constantly adapting. The ways in which people create, it changes all the time. You know, you look at, like, the Renaissance versus contemporary art. It's two totally different things. So I think we're just really trying to embrace the tools that we have now. Yeah. And that obviously doesn't take away from people who are painting. I think that's amazing. Yeah. There's just so many different ways to create, and this is just one of them.
So we didn't really talk about become like little children. Give me a little bit on the message behind become like little children.
I work with kids, so I get to see all the fun, the hard, the good, everything in between. And I think kids are just so pure. so humble. They tell you like it is.
Yeah.
Sometimes that's hard. But I think in the scriptures, Jesus has talked about how the greatest in God's kingdom are little children, people who are humble, people who are pure.
Yeah.
So we're really trying to show that we need to be humble. We need to have these Christ-like attributes.
Absolutely. And that Jesus Christ just loves everyone so much, and that everyone has divine potential that he can see in them as well.
Yeah.
Yep. So, and there's a little bit of it in there, but I really see it happen in Christ with red robes. And there's some neat effects that are happening around Christ. Are those things that you're putting in up front and saying, hey, give me baubles and bubbles and things that are going to be around here? Or is that something you kind of said, wow, that was a cool effect. How do I get that to happen again? Because, like I say, there's a lot of neat things happening in that piece that I'm like, well, where does that come from?
Yes, I think it's kind of a little bit of both. Sometimes we get a really cool texture or pattern and we're like, whoa, I want more of this. I think with Christ in red robes, we intentionally wanted those little splotches, I guess, around Jesus. And then we also added a few when we were editing as well afterwards to get the, what's the word? Like the layout right, I guess.
Yeah, yeah.
You know what I mean? Like the balance on the piece.
Get the design and
balance.
balance of the piece to work, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because like I say, it's just cool to see, when they first came out with synthesizers. That's probably another parallel. There was the band Queen. The album that We Will Rock You is on. They have a set of liner notes on the side of it, and one of the things they like say on the thing is no synths, and they're really like
Oh my gosh.
because at the time if a band used a synthesizer or something like that, it was faking music again.
Right.
And the guy that came up with the synthesizer, the Moog and all that stuff, wasn't trying to make this odd sounding device. He was trying to make something that would replicate a piano perfectly in a small little space so you didn't have to move around a piano. Right. But you put it in the hands of musicians, and musicians like, yeah, but man, you turn the knob all the way over here to the left and push that down. It's wow,
Yeah.
And, now you have, like I say, you've created something, you put it into the hands of creative individual, put it in the hands of artists, and I don't care if it sounds like a piano. I love the fact that I can make it sound like this. Mm-hmm. And like I say, when I look at how the stuff appears around Christ and everything in that piece, I'm like, oh, that's a cool effect.
Yeah.
And, like I say, and and you've got, again, there was bits and pieces of it and become like little children. And maybe they were reversed in order, but I'm like, oh, wow. Again, a neat little signature thing again to know this is something coming out of your guy's space.
Yeah, for sure. I think that comes down to Anna's sharp eyes as well. She can kind of evaluate, and sometimes that effect won't work with some of the pieces, but the ability to choose and see what works, I think, really sets it apart.
Well, it's not going to work in a piece like Jesus Went With Them.
Right.
Here's a real scene, I've got this place and everything like that. It's much more that kind of study, negative space all around the individuals type pieces where you can have a lot of fun with what's going on in that space.
Yeah, and I love that. I love that kind of texture. So it's been really fun to make pieces like that.
Yeah. But like I say, so again, Christ in red robes, kind of self-explanatory, but give me a little bit more on that one.
Yeah, kind of embodies the atonement of Jesus Christ in a very sacred, personal way. Obviously, Jesus Christ died for all of us, and I think you can kind of sense the reverence and the magnitude when you look at that piece. It comes off very grand, I think.
And we just talked about quickly, Jesus Went With Them. Again, very direct biblical passage lift.
Right.
Yeah, I feel like it's one of our few pieces that is more like historical. I think a lot of our pieces are the more like modern, taking people in from our world. But I like that we had them facing away from the viewer, because then that can also put us in their shoes.
Into the space, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Like, there are times then that we may not recognize Jesus Christ in our lives, just like the disciples did not recognize Jesus Christ at the time in that story. So that our style kind of came into play in that way.
Yeah. Well, you've just done a series, and I think we've done that in another episode, of pieces that are much more traditional Christ-like pieces.
Yes.
I have the best time with your stuff that is not as traditional. We'll go back to Jawa Jesus and just say, and in fact, there's stuff that nobody's seen, but if you go to your Messiah AI thing, I mean, you've got the basketball playing. I mean, like I say, I love some of this, because, it's just kind of fun. Part of the thing is like, again, are you really serious about making this piece of art? No, you're kind of having a lot of fun with it.
Right.
And, it's just one of those things where you have the ability to be like, oh, I got this wacky idea. Let's have some fun with it really quickly, and maybe it's going to be something, but move on from it. So you've got a bunch of stuff that nobody's really seen.
Right.
What's the furthest out that you've put something?
Ooh.
That's a good question.
Just the most unique, crazy type things. Well, I made a couple pieces that were kind of Star Wars related. So, Jesus Christ holding a baby Yoda in a very unique way.
Yeah.
Maybe actually it was many baby Yodas. There was one of him kind of showing down against Imperial walkers. I gave that one to my dad because that has meaning to him.
Yep.
Yeah.
Those are some of the more out there ones. Just
we have like Jesus riding a manta ray.
Yeah.
Things obviously Jesus did not do during his lifetime, but
things maybe kids can relate to or kids will find joy in.
Yeah.
Jesus Christ is very dynamic as an individual. I'm of the opinion he was also very fun, very joyful all the time. So
why I love the piece of Jesus on the camel. I'll just sit there and say, again, I don't know. You can assume he was kind of in the territory where they were. Good chance he probably rode one.
right.
But
I think so.
I've never seen one of those. And you guys brought it in.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah.
And we love experimenting with that kind of thing because it really just like sets off a different kind of feeling when you see something like Jesus on a camel.
Yeah, like what did Jesus do outside of the Bible stories? Like you don't think about that very often. But it's kind of fun to think about. Maybe he rode a camel. Who knows? You know?
I'd like to believe he did.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like going over to the Middle East and not riding a camel.
How could you not?
What's the point? Cool. Is there anything you guys are working on right now that you're kind of excited about that we haven't had a chance to see but might be around by the time this comes out?
Ooh. Well, we're both a little bit busy. I'm in school, Anna's working full-time, but we do try and dedicate time to creating new pieces all the time. We think it's a good idea to be constantly creating, so we do have a couple pieces that we are excited to hopefully roll out here at some point.
Yeah, we got like Jesus with a campfire that we're
Nice,
trying to
nice.
work on right now. Yeah, things like that. I don't know, things that we love incorporated into the space with Jesus. So we'll see.
Yeah, stay
Yeah, we'll
tuned.
keep you
Cool.
updated.
And you have graduated. You're graduating pretty soon.
Yes, this coming April, so
Excellent.
exciting times.
Yep. Cool. Well, I want to thank you so much for coming in the studio today. It's awesome to have you here. It's awesome to see what you're creating all the time. Love the fact that we're sitting here with people that just kind of, like I say, to me, we're at the cutting front edge of what this was going on, or what's going on with this before anybody else, and you had some really grand, broad ideas of where this can be going.
Thank you.
And I just think it's really cool that we have the chance to be with you. I want to thank you all for being with us today. This is Scott Usher. This has been Haven Light Spotlight, and we look forward to seeing you here again.